energy and life standard as 4a. What are autotrophs? Autotrophs are plants and organisms that use light energy from sun to produce their own food. Autotroph comes from the Greek word autos, meaning self, and trophy means nourishing or producer. And some examples of autotrophs are green plants, some bacteria, and protists. Here you see in this equation, here carbon dioxide, which is taken from the environment, water is taken via root. So green plants, they produce glucose in presence of carbon dioxide and water. They make glucose by using sunlight, and oxygen is released in this process. So this process is known as photosynthesis. So here again, green plants, they utilize carbon dioxide from the environment and water from the root, and in presence of light energy they make food known as glucose, and oxygen is released. This process is known as photosynthesis. So here's the green plant, and it is using sunlight and producing glucose by using carbon dioxide and water. What are heterotrophs? Heterotrophs are animals that obtain energy from the foods they consume. They cannot use sun's energy directly. Because they cannot make their own food, they have to depend on primary producers. For example, here impalas, they eat grass, and so they are getting energy from the grasses, and grasses are primary producer. They get energy from the sun. So therefore impalas are dependent on grass to get energy. What is ATP? The full form of ATP is adenosine triphosphate, and one ATP molecule is composed of an adenine plus a 5-carbon sugar called ribose and 3 phosphate groups. So if you see here in the diagram, you have a molecule adenine, here's the ribose sugar, and here you see these 3 phosphate groups are attached. That is why it is known as adenosine triphosphate. How the energy is stored? ADP is known as adenosine diphosphate. When a cell has energy available, it can store small amounts of it by adding a phosphate group to ADP molecules, producing ATP. So ATP is like a fully charged battery. It's ready to power the machinery of the cell. So here in the diagram, this is the ADP. It has lower energy, and when a phosphate group is attached with it, the energy is higher, and it has 3 phosphate molecules known as ATP. What is the difference between ATP and ADP? ATP means adenosine triphosphate. ADP is adenosine diphosphate. So here if you see here, this pi represents 1 unit of phosphate. So in this ADP we have 2 phosphate group, and when one more phosphate group is added, the energy becomes higher, and the resultant molecule is known as ATP or adenosine triphosphate. And you can compare ADP as a partially charged battery, whereas ATP is fully charged battery. What is the role of ATP in cellular activities? ATP is used by cells to store and release energy. So basically it is an energy currency. Whenever it is needed, energy is released when ATP is converted into ADP. So here's the structure of ATP, which has adenine molecule, a 5-carbon sugar ribose, and 3 phosphate group, and these are high energy phosphate bond, And as we know, whenever bonds are broken, energy is released. So in this case, here one phosphate group will be removed from adenosine triphosphate, and it is going to convert into adenosine diphosphate, and energy is released in this process. So here's the adenosine. There are three inorganic phosphate groups. So adenosine, tri, because there are three, and phosphate. So ATP is a chemical compound. It's used by cell to store and release energy. What is the ultimate source of energy for plants? Sunlight. Sunlight is the ultimate source of energy for plants. As you can see, plants are autotrophs and they make their own food in presence of sunlight by utilizing water via root, and they absorb CO2 from the environment and oxygen is released in the process. Where do cells get the energy to regenerate ATP? Cells get the energy to regenerate ATP from carbohydrates, and it is a part of our food, such as glucose, starch. All these are carbohydrates, which is a part of our food, and it gives us energy. So cells get the energy to generate ATP from carbohydrate. Here in this diagram, autotrophs, both autotrophs and heterotrophs, they get the energy from the food. So these organic compounds, these are our food, and we get energy from these main sources, carbohydrates, and also we get energy from proteins as well, but carbohydrates are chief or main source of energy.